Hello students, welcome to second lecture of chemistry in everyday life. In previous lecture we were discussing about the drugs and drugs action, and now let's proceed further in the same topic. So previously we discussed about the drug action on allosteric site so that the active site of the enzyme will change. And because of the changed shape, now substrate cannot be attached with it. Now in certain cases this type of bondings becomes permanent bonding by the covalent bond, and that's why it cannot be broken easily, and then enzyme is blocked permanently. That means now we cannot use that enzyme for same type of reaction again, and that's why body degrades the enzyme inhibitor complex and then synthesizes new enzyme. So that means in this type of drug action our enzyme will be useless. That's why body will degrade it and it will produce new one. Now another type of action is receptors as drug targets. So receptors are proteins that are crucial to body's communication processes. Majority of these are embedded in the cell membrane as shown in figure 16.4. So we already discussed that the receptors are hanging out of the body. That means some portion of receptor is outside the body of cell and some portion is inside, so that we can communicate with cell without tearing its wall or by injecting something inside it. So as this image suggests, this is our cell, and if we zoom in the small part of our cell's wall, as it suggests, small part of the cell membrane, which is known as plasma membrane also. So if we zoom in, then this is the cell wall, and as we can see, at the center we have receptor protein. Some portion of the receptor protein is coming out of the body and some portion is inside the body. And just like enzyme, we have binding site of receptor. That means it is one type of active site of the receptor where messages in form of molecules will be attached. That means let's say we want certain reaction to be initiated inside the cell. So that's why we will send specific type of molecules which can fit on the surface of this type of receptor. When receptors are attached on the surface, they will change the structure of our receptor, and receptor will change its shape, and that's why it can send signals inside the cell. Just like in previous case, when we attach our medicine or drug molecule on the allosteric site of enzyme, then active site of enzyme will change. Similar type of process will occur here when specific type of receptors attached on the surface of the receptor, then it will change the shape of receptor from the bottom side or inside the cell, and that's why we can initiate required reactions. So the receptor proteins are embedded in the cell membrane in such way that their small part possessing active site projects out of the surface of membrane and opens on the outside region of the cell membrane, as we already seen in this image. In the body, message between two neurons and that between the neurons to muscles is communicated through the certain chemicals. These chemicals known as chemical messengers. That means they are a type of molecules which can fit with a specific type of molecule to start production of certain chemicals. So they are one type of chemicals. That's why it is mentioned chemical messengers. So chemical messengers are received at the binding site of the receptor protein. To accommodate a messenger, shape of the receptor site changes. This brings about the transfer of message into the cell. Thus, chemical messenger give message to the cell without entering the cell. Okay, so this is the main point. Our requirement is we do not need to tear or damage the cell, and that's why we have to inject chemicals inside without hurting the cell wall, and it is obtained by, as mentioned in this process, when molecules attach with the receptors will change their shape so that they can start certain type of reaction inside the cell. So as we can see in this image, this is our binding site, and then we have chemical messenger, just like mentioned in previous example, enzyme and receptor, enzyme and reactant. So when this messenger attaches on the body of the receptor, now what is the initial shape of the receptor at the bottom? So when this active site is obtained by the chemical messenger, when it is occupied by the chemical messenger, then shape of the receptor will change, which is present inside the cell, and that's why it can signal or initiate certain type of reaction inside the cell. And when this molecule is removed, again receptor is back to its initial state, and that's why now production of required chemical is stopped. So that's how receptor works. There are large number of different receptors in body that interact with different chemical messengers. These receptors shows selectivity for one chemical messenger over the other because their binding sites have different shapes, structures, and amino acid compositions. So these are proteins, that's why their constituent units are amino acids. So, drug that binds to the receptor site and inhibits the its natural function is called antagonist. So that means just like in first case, that means in case of enzymes, we are using same type of treatment. When we have same shaped molecule as our messenger, then they can attach with our receptors. And now receptors active sites are blocked for messenger molecules so that we can prevent certain type of chemical reaction inside the cell. So these type of drugs are called antagonist. These are useful when blocking of the message is required. There are other types of the drugs that mimic the natural messenger by switching on the receptor. These are called agonist. That means by certain problems, let's say our body stopped producing required messenger molecules, and that's why no production of required reaction is being occur inside the body, because when messengers are attached with the receptors, then they will send the signal inside the cell and production will start. But because of lack of the messenger, no reaction is occurring inside the cell. So let's say we want those type of reactions, that's why we will add certain type of drugs which mimics the action of our messenger molecule. That means they will help to initiate reactions. So these mimic molecules will attach with the receptors will send the signal and production will start. So these type of molecule which initiates the reaction, they are called agonist. If this type of drug molecule stops the reaction, then they are antagonist, and if they initiates the reaction, then they are known as agonist. Now let's say let's have one easy example to understand both of these. Let's say when we eat, our stomach produces acids which helps in digestion or dilution of product. So let's say stomach is empty but still it is producing acids and it will result in acidity. So in this case we need to stop production of acid, and that's why we will use antagonist which stops certain type of reaction. In this case our reaction is production of acid. So this antagonist. And let's say second type of example, our body uses energy obtained from the glucose by breaking the glucose molecule. And for that we need specific type of enzymes inside the body. But let's say our body is not able to produce those chemicals, and that's why glucose molecules are being collected inside the bloods, and it is normally known as diabetes. For that we need some chemicals which can break glucose molecules and we can convert it into energy, and that's why we will use insulins. So insulin can be considered as agonist. That means it starts certain required reactions. Next part, therapeutic action of different classes of drugs. Now in this case we will discuss the drugs on their action, based on their actions. Our first category is antacid. So as the name suggests, it is against the acid. Overproduction of acid in the stomach causes irritation and pain, normally known as acidity. In the severe cases, ulcers are developed in the stomach. Until 1970, only treatment for acidity was administration of the antacids, such as sodium hydrogen carbonate or mixture of aluminum and magnesium hydroxides. So simple thing, if stomach produces excess amount of acid, then we should add base to neutralize it. So these are the basic compounds: sodium hydrogen carbonates and aluminum and magnesium hydroxides. However, excessive hydrogen carbonates can make the stomach alkaline and trigger the production of even more acid. Metal hydroxides are better alternative because of being insoluble. So that means they will react if acid is present, and if acid is not present, then they will remain insoluble. If stomach produces acid, then they will neutralize it without adding excess basic medium. If it dissolves in the solution, then they will produce basic medium, but if they are present as insoluble mass, then no basic medium will be obtained or produced. So they are insoluble, and these thus do not increase the pH above neutrality. Now this treatment only controls symptoms and not the cause. That means symptom is irritation and pain in the stomach. So this treatment only solves that problem. But acidity is caused by production of acid. But so that means acid is still being produced. We are just removing the produced acid. We are not stopping the excess amount of acid production. Therefore, with these metal salts, the patient cannot be treated easily. In advanced stage, ulcer becomes life-threatening, and its only treatment is removal of affected part of the stomach. That means we have to operate the stomach. A major breakthrough in the treatment of hyperacidity came through the discovery according to which a chemical histamine stimulates the secretion of pepsin and hydrochloric acid in stomach. So now these are the chemicals which are responsible for acidity, but these same chemicals are responsible for digestion of food. So if we completely stop the production of these acids, then we cannot digest food. But excess amount of acid is causing the problems. So our solution should be, we should stop production in excess quantity. We should not stop it completely. The drug cimetidine or Tegamet was designed to prevent the interaction of histamine with the receptors present in the stomach wall. When histamine molecules are attached with the receptors of stomach wall cells, then they will start or they will send the message to initiate the production of acid. So as mentioned in previous example, it is a drug receptor interaction. This resulted in the release of lesser amount of acid. That means we are stopping the interaction between histamine and receptor, and that's why it produces less quantity of acid. The importance of the drug was so much that it remained the largest selling drug in the world until the another drug, ranitidine or Zantac, was discovered. So shape of all of these three are mentioned. First is histamine, which is natural molecule which initiates the production of acid by sending signals to receptor. Second is cimetidine, which prevents the action of histamine with receptor. And third one is ranitidine, next drug which is more developed drugs than cimetidine for the same cause. So our next topic is antihistamine. Now previous drugs were related to acid production, but this drug is specifically mentioned or produced for histamine purpose. Histamine is a potent vasodilator. That means it can cause widening of blood vessel. That means blood vessel will expand and blood circulation will increase. It has various functions. It contracts the smooth muscles in the bronchi and gut and relaxes other muscles. Now bronchi is a connection between the windpipe and lungs. As we can see in this image, this is our windpipe known as trachea, and these are the two lungs on the either side, and the connection between these two, as we can see here, it is bronchi. That means connection between windpipe and lungs. Histamine is also responsible for the nasal congestion associated with the common cold and allergic responses to pollen. Synthetic drugs brompheniramine or dimetap and terfenadine and saldan acts as antihistamines. They interfere with the natural action of the histamine by competing with the histamine for binding site of the receptor where histamine exerts its effect. Now the question that arises is, why do above mentioned antihistamines not affect the secretion of acid in the stomach? The reason is that anti-allergic and anti-acid drugs work on different receptors. So that means we have different type of histamine molecules working with the different type of receptors. So image of brompheniramine and terfenadine are mentioned here, and as we can see they are very complex structures. Next is neurologically active drugs. Now in neurologically active drugs, our first category is tranquilizers. So tranquilizers and analgesics are neurological active drugs. These affect the message transfer mechanism for the nerve to receptor. So let's say pain. Pain is felt by us because our body parts send signals about the pain towards the brain, and brain then process it, and then we can feel the pain. So simple solution for pain killing is we should stop the signal. If you can stop the signal, then you cannot feel the pain. So tranquilizers and analgesics do the same. Okay, they affect the message transfer mechanism from nerve to receptor. So tranquilizers are a class of chemical compounds used for the treatment of stress and mild or even severe mental diseases. This relieves anxiety, stress, irritability, or excitement by inducing a sense of well-being. They form an essential component of the sleeping pills. That means our sleeping pills uses tranquilizers to calm down us. There are various type of tranquilizers. They functions by different mechanisms. For example, noradrenaline is one of the neurotransmitters that plays a role in mood change. If the level of noradrenaline is low for some reason, then the signal sending activity becomes low and person suffers from depression. In such situation, antidepressant drugs are required. These drugs inhibit the enzyme which catalyzes the degradation of noradrenaline. If the enzyme is inhibited, this important neurotransmitter is slowly metabolized and can activate its receptor for longer period of time, thus counteracting the effect of depression. Iproniazide and phenelzine are two such drugs, and the structure of these two drugs are mentioned here. Some tranquilizers, namely chlordiazepoxide and meprobamate, are relatively mild tranquilizer suitable for relieving tension. Equanil is used in controlling the depression and hypertension, and their structures are mentioned. Derivatives of barbituric acids that are veronal, amital, nambutal, luminal, and seconal constitute an important class of tranquilizers. These derivatives are called barbiturates. Barbiturates are hypnotic, that is, sleep producing agents. Some other substances used as tranquilizers are valine and serotonin, and their structures are mentioned here. Second category of these type of drugs are analgesics. Analgesics reduces or abolish the pain without causing impairment of the consciousness, mental confusion, incoordination, or paralysis or some other disturbance of nervous system. That means first category can cause all of this mentioned. So these are classified as follow: non-narcotic or non-addictive analgesic and narcotic drugs. Narcotic drugs, as we know, they are banned, but they are used in specific cases. So first, non-narcotic or non-addictive analgesic drugs. Aspirin and paracetamol belong to the class of non-narcotic analgesic drugs, and they are easily available in medical store. Aspirin is the most familiar example. Aspirin inhibits the synthesis of chemical known as prostaglandins, which stimulates the inflammation in the tissue and cause pain. These drugs are effective in relieving skeletal pain such as that due to the arthritis. These drugs have many other effects such as reducing fever, that means it is antipyretic effect, and preventing platelet coagulation. That means if blood coagulates inside the veins, then it can cause heart attack. So this drug can remove that type of coagulation, or it prevents this type of coagulation. So it is also used for heart treatment. Because of this, its anti-blood clogging action, aspirin finds use in prevention of heart attack. Next category, narcotic analgesics. Morphine and many of its homologs, when administered in medicinal doses, it relieves pain and produces sleep. In poisonous doses, that means in higher quantity, this produces stupor, coma, convulsions, and ultimately death. Morphine narcotics are sometimes referred to us as opiates since they are obtained from the opium poppy. These analgesics are chiefly used for the relief of post-operative pain, cardiac pain, and the pain of terminal cancer and in childbirth. So all of these mentioned pains are extreme case of pains. Okay, so that means if you have mild headache, then you should use first category. But if you have extreme pain situation, as for example as mentioned here, or let's say you have bullet wound, then you should use narcotic drugs in that cases. So that's why they are right now necessary. They are addictive, but they can deal with extreme pain situations, and that's why we still use it even though they are banned. Okay, but they are not available for each and every person. And structure of morphine and its homologs are mentioned here. We have morphine, heroin, and codeine.